Redditors who knew men caught on to catch a predator before the show. What were they like? Oh, I can actually answer this one. He legit was always trying to sleep with men that were way too young for him, albeit just barely legal, and we made jokes all the time to him about how he was going to wind up on that show. We literally called him Herbert. It was the opposite of a he was the last person I would suspect situation. Did he end up getting convicted? I read somewhere that only like 1/4 or 1/3 of the people that get caught on that show actually end up with a conviction. I never expected Dwight to go postal. It's always the last person you expect, and I always expected Dwight to go postal. I didn't know the person directly, but I worked at a company that had an employee caught on the show. This was particularly problematic, as the company was Nickelodeon Animation. Everyone who knew the guy was actually pretty shocked. It was particularly rough for his girlfriend at the time, as she also worked at the studio, so there was no hiding from it. For their part, Nickelodeon instituted rigorous background checks for every new employee after the incident, with zero tolerance for any misdeeds involving children. Those background checks are what keeps this law alive though, as the process is much more intensive than any other studio. I remember that episode and recall they specifically pointed out on the show that he worked for Nickelodeon. Dan Schneider. Yes, Matty Nash. He was creepy and kept trying to get me to go to Burning Man. When I told him I didn't think that was a good idea because I had a 10-year-old kid at the time, he said I should bring my kid. Now I don't think he was interested in my kid at all, but I did tell him I thought that would be super creepy to bring a kid to Burning Man with a bunch of people on E. This was in 2001. He came over to my house under the guise of talking business and then put the moves on me. I turned him down and sent him home to his wife. Burning Man sounds like hell on earth, to be honest. Piggybacking off of this, I just experienced some oddly creepy way of talking from an officer that comes into where I work. He'd make jabs about a co-worker that was obnoxious, saying she must be horrible to have around for the holidays, and then brought up if I had your address I could send her over to annoy you, and then proceeded to stick to the address part, finding ways to subtly imply he wanted me to give it to him. Nope, fuck that. Dude also mentioned his husband and would slowly get closer and closer while talking to me to the point of feeling uncomfortable, like he was cornering me. Would not be surprised to find out he's a creep. I was one dude's RA in university. He was a seriously weird dude, but was relatively friendly, came out to all of the campus events, and was not suspected of being a predator at all by any of us in the dorms back in those days. He was busted on TCAP about 2 to 3 years after I graduated, so probably sometime 2003 to 2005. How was he weird? Rapey, extremely rapey. Was someone from my hometown in NY. Went to school with a younger sister. After he graduated high school, he did everything he could to hang out with much younger kids. Always wanted to buy booze for us or roll up a joint and smoke us out in his van. Never touched me, but there were rumors of him molesting a 12-year-old in sleepaway camp. Molesting a 12-year-old in sleepaway camp. What's sleepaway camp? I thought that was a shitty horror franchise. I fortunately don't know any predators, but I did work with a young woman who'd worked on the show. She did the post-production voiceovers for the catfishing texts between the detectives and the predators. She was the voice of the non-existent teen girl. Like the "oh, I don't know much about sex, I'm only 13 lol" stuff. Apparently she was a production assistant or intern at the production office, and one of the producers was like, "We need somebody with a young sounding voice, you say something," and she did, and he was like, "Perfect. Come with me," and she recorded all the dialogue. Right after she told a bunch of us at work, this was a couple years later at a different job, I went home that night and watched an episode and could tell it absolutely was her voice. Hilarious. I've always wondered about the girls who do the voices, haha. That's so interesting that they picked a member of the crew. You might know predators too. They could be anyone. Ah, stunning. Remember the fine young lad who got caught not once, but twice? Went to my high school. Had a class or two with him. Which one? Oops, or I just came to get something to eat. More than one person have gotten caught twice on TCAP. Never heard of this show, so I googled it. Why did To Catch a Predator get cancelled? Cancellation. The show was cancelled in 2008, in part because Louis Conrad, an assistant district attorney in Rockwall County, Texas, shot himself after he was caught talking to and exchanging pictures with a perverted justice volunteer posing as a 13-year-old boy. Ha ha ha, wow, WTF. Yeah, wild, hey ha ha. It was actually really bad though, because everyone I caught that season got let off because of that. Seriously, WTF. Ever knew one of them, but a guy who sat behind me in high school Spanish ended up being locked up for making child porn. He was a weird guy. Like, almost normal but just real awkward socially. I'm a bit socially awkward, and it's always stories like this that makes me think, well, I don't have it that bad, it seems. People who make child porn are the worst scum on this earth. Almost normal, minus the making child porn part. Alright. I actually knew a guy who ended up getting caught on TCAP. We were not super close or anything, but we took a few classes together and had labs together. To give you some time context, I would have met him originally in like 2001 or 2002. It was my senior year in high school, but I was taking a community college physics class. He was 1 year older than me, having just graduated the year early. He was born in '83, I was born in '84. I didn't really get to know him very much in that course, but I did in a later that I was taking in like late 2002 or early 2003. I knew him from physics classes, nothing else. I remember we were in the same lab group, so we were spending 3 to 4 hours at a time working on some lab project. He was an immigrant from India, and a rather small man, very thin and fairly short. He was a Sikh and kept his hair covered. His English was pretty good though. You can just sort of tell, this guy was the type of guy who had no luck with girls, like zero, which is really common for a lot of dudes at this age though, but this was like, worst case scenario for a guy. He had no attention of any kind from women. And we are in a physics class, awkward with girls probably explains the majority of young guys in that class at that time in our lives. One time he wanted to teach me a lesson about never meeting girls online. He told me a story about how his friend, figure similar situation, was trying to meet girls online, and then he met this one. She looked a little chubby in her face in her picture, but then he went to go meet her at the amusement park. And to his horror, it was a very obese woman. His friend had no idea on how to bail, so he just sort of went along with it. They went and did some rides, then they got on the roller coaster, where when the ride ended she got stuck, and the ride operator was unable to help her, so they had to shut it down, call in a technician who had to disassemble the ride to get her out. As he was telling me this story he was laughing harder and harder. He then proceeded to point to an obese woman in the class and he whispers to me, "And let me tell you my friend, it was her right over there," and he then erupted into laughter. And that, my friend, is why you do not want to meet women online, because you never know what you could get yourself into. I remember the class he told me this joke in, and I remember taking it in spring of 2003, so I would have been like 18 or had just turned 19. That was the last class I took with him. But I do recall seeing him in the summer of 2004, at a different school, when I was waiting for a ride home, in a parking lot for about a minute or two. Basically just said hello, asked what we are doing at the place, then sort of just left. We were never online buddies, MySpace friends, or did anything in any social context outside of a classroom or lab. No lunch, no party, nothing. He ended up getting busted on TCAP in Jan of 2006. I don't recall seeing the episode until 2007 or so. I remember the story he told me about meeting women online. I honestly have the hunch that the Sting was the first person that was ever talking to him sexually. Like if he said he has never done such a thing, I believe it. The guy was an absolute max level incel long before the incel movement. I did read the chat log he had with the decoy and it was pretty sick though. The dude was definitely fucked up. If you watched the show, he was the guy who claimed to be into academics and know about the law when trying to talk to Chris Hansen. That was definitely the vibe I remember from in class. Late to the thread but an absolute killer comment, mate, thanks for chiming in. Always sad how things that seemed so innocent and innocuous end up being remembered as a moment of damn, I should have seen this coming. Thank you. This is the kind of content I came to this thread for. Posts like yours don't come around too often, I would read it again and again. Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.